If you looked at your timeline yesterday, you probably saw a community having an identity crisis. And I don't just mean people arguing in the comments, I mean literally looking at the same video from the same content creator and watching the title flip-flop in real time. 1 minute it says the best updates, and next it says the worst updates. It sounds like clickbait, and it probably is, but it is actually the perfect summary of exactly where HSR is right now. Version 3.8 is arguably the most confusing patch we have ever seen. It is simultaneously the most aggressive power spike in the game's history, and arguably the emptiest content drop HoYoverse has ever released. It is an 8-week desert disguised as an oasis. The reason creators can't decide if it's the best or the worst is because it depends entirely on what you value. Do you care about the damage numbers on your screen, or do you care about actually having a game to play? And now the extended duration of this patch might not be entirely in HoYoverse's control. Delays happen, right? But we need to talk about how they are choosing to handle it, because the way they are filling that time isn't an accident, it is a strategy. If you enjoy these kinds of deep dives, looking past the drama to see the mechanics underneath, do me a favor please, hit that like button and consider subscribing. It really does help the channel more than you think. To understand why this feels so weird, we have to start with the calendar. Let's be real about the schedule. Version 3.8 is confirmed to be 8 weeks long. That is 2 full months. In the live service world, that is a very long time. And to be fair, sometimes developers need extra time, whether it's technical depth, production issues, or preparing for the massive version 4.0, or maybe it's political issues, I don't know at this point. Delays are the reality of game development, and I'm not here to yell at them for needing more time. However, if you're going to ask your player base to stick around for double the usual duration, you usually try to cushion the blow. You give them something substantial to chew on, maybe a new permanent game mode, a massive expansion to the simulated universe, I don't know, or at least a high replayability event. But looking at version 3.8, we are not getting a meal, we are barely getting snacks. The flagship event is the 𝗖ecie𝗽𝗆𝗵𝗁 Championship. It is essentially a Pokemon clone. It looks charming, and these events are usually fun, but let's be honest, it is a mini game. It is something you finish in a weekend. And then you have Remnants of Twilight, which is your standard combat challenge. And for a normal 4-week patch, this is fine. But stretching that thin layer of content over 8 weeks feels incredibly optimistic. It leaves a massive void where the gameplay should be. And if you look closer to the assets, you can see why. The new map is functionally just a retexture of the Duelight Pavilion. The new boss, the Swarm Nightmare, is literally Sam painted purple with some bug acids glued on. And again, this confirms that the delay is likely due to resource constraints. The main team is clearly busy with version 4.0, but acknowledging that doesn't change the reality for the player. We are looking at 2 months of logging in, doing dailies, and logging out. So if you're looking at the map and feel like there's nothing to do, you're not crazy, you're right. And yet, despite the empty stage, the hype train is running at full speed. Why? Because while the world is quiet, the actors being introduced are revolutionary. Because you have to think, right? If the map is empty, the events are filler, and even the biggest fans are changing their titles to worst updates, where did the best update narrative even come from? It comes from the spreadsheets. While the content players are starving, the meta players are eating good. HoYoverse's business strategy isn't selling gameplay, they're selling a solution again. Meet Constance, also known as the Dahlia. On the surface, she looks like another fire unit, but if you look at the fine print for her kits, she does something that shouldn't be possible. She allows your team to deal super break damage before you actually break the enemy's toughness bar. And that is crazy. But let me explain why that is ridiculous in very simple terms. Since the game launched, the rule for break teams has been consistent. You have to work for your damage. You spend turns chipping away at that white bar, doing almost 0 damage until crack you break it, and then you get your big reward. That ramp up time was the only thing keeping teams like Fireflies balanced. That was the cost of doing business. Constance deletes that cost. She looks at the game's rulebook and shreds it. With her gloomy zone, you are dealing your maximum damage numbers from turn 1, completely ignoring the mechanic that was supposed to slow you down. She is effectively a mechanical patch for the game engine, sold to you for 160 stellar jades a pop. It gets even more interesting depending on the size of your wallet. In phase 2, they are bringing back 𝗖cie𝗽𝗆𝗵𝗁. 𝗖cie𝗽's whole gimmick is adding a secondary toughness bar to enemies, which is essentially let you break them twice. Now put the pieces together, you have Firefly, who forces fire weakness onto enemies, and you have Constance, who lets you do damage while the bar is still up, and you have 𝗖cie𝗽𝗆𝗵𝗁, who gives you a second bar to break once the first one is gone. This is literally like Exodia. It doesn't matter what the enemy does. It doesn't matter if they lock their weakness. It doesn't matter if they have 10 million million HP. Well, actually, it probably does matter if they have millions of HP. The math on this team is so dominant that it stops being a fight and starts being a spreadsheet calculation. It probably is a spreadsheet calculation for a while. The excitement we are seeing from creators isn't just hype. The realization that if you own this team, you essentially solve the combat. You are not buying a fun experience in version 3.8. You are buying the solution to every problem the game is going to throw at you for the next 6 months. This kind of power creep, this aggressive push towards mechanical dominance, didn't happen by accident. In fact, if you have been paying attention, the warning signs were already there. You know, about 2 weeks ago, before we knew anything about this live stream, Vars2 released a video that a lot of people dismissed. He warned about something called Accelerationism. If you're not familiar with the term, it is basically just a fancy way of saying that the game is moving too fast for its own good. It is when the developers release new characters that are so much stronger than the old ones that your previous investments feel worthless in record time. People called it doom posting. They said he was exaggerating. But looking at version 3.8, it turns out he wasn't exaggerating. He was just spoiling the ending. The Constance and Firefly synergy we just talked about is accelerationism in its purest form. We aren't seeing a simple damage increase. We are seeing the game mechanics themselves being rewritten to make older units obsolete. If you stick to a break team 6 months ago, you are not just behind the curve, you are playing a different, slower game. And then there's the cost. Vars2 warned that the pace of releasing 2 new 5-star characters every patch was already putting an enormous strain on anyone who doesn't have an infinite bank account. HoYoverse apparently heard that complaint and decided to double down. Version 3.8 isn't sticking to the standard 2-phase cycle. They are introducing a 3-phase banner schedule. That is 3 separate windows of must-have characters crammed into a single update. It is an unprecedented drain on your resources. The way they have arranged it makes it even trickier. It is a calculated currency war against your wallet. Get it? That new game mode currency war, and I just thought, anyways. Here is the setup. In phases 1 and 2, they dangle the perfect break team right in front of you, Constance and 𝗖cie. They know you need them to keep up with the power creep, so you drain your savings. You spend every stellar jade you have to build that Exodia team we mentioned. But then just as you hit 0, phase 3 arrives, and who is waiting there? 𝗖cie and Sunday. These two are the keys to the summoner meta. So the game forces you into a brutal choice. Do you buy the solution to the new super break meta, or do you save for the summon meta? You can't have both unless you pay up, man. It is a pincer move designed to catch players who emptied their reserves early. Version 3.8 manifest every structural flaw Vars2 pointed out, all arriving at once. We have rampant power creep, we have aggressive monetization, and as we established earlier, we have almost no actual content to play with these expensive new toys. When you combine that financial pressure with a content drought, the game enters a very specific, very dangerous phase. This brings us to a specific term in the business world that perfectly describes where HSR is sitting right now. It is called the extraction phase. When a live service game is new, it is what we call a growth phase. The developers throw everything at you. Massive maps, free rewards, endless story chapters, because they're trying to get you in the door. They want your attention. But recently, or for the past year, this is not growth anymore. This is extraction. HoYoverse knows that if you're still playing in version 3.8, you probably aren't going anywhere. You are invested. So they stop trying to impress you with content and start trying to maximize the value they can get out of you. It is a specific trade-off. They are offering you peak mechanical power, the strongest units the game has ever seen. But in exchange, you have to endure a 50-day vacuum where there is almost nothing to actually play. They give you the keys to a Ferrari, but they only give you a 10-foot driveway to drive it on. I call this the golden cage. The gold is the characters. Constance, 𝗖cie, Firefly, they are beautiful, they are powerful, and they feel great to use. They are the shiny objects that keep you logging in. But the cage is the patch itself. You are trapped in the 8-week cycle with recycled maps, a stamina-gated event, and a Pokemon minigame. You have all of this power, but nothing meaningful to use it on. And make no mistake, this is a calculated transaction. Version 3.8 is a holding pattern. It is designed to bridge the gap to version 4.0 while ensuring when the new region finally drops, your stellar jade reserves are at absolute 0. They're draining the tank now so that you have to refill it with real money later. It is not a dead game, and it is not a failed update. It is just business. And right now, business is about extraction. So when you step back and look at the whole picture, version 3.8 is a bit of a paradox. It perfectly captures exactly where HSR is right now. On one hand, it is arguably the most essential patch we have had all year. If you care about the meta, if you care about big numbers and clearing content efficiently, you literally cannot afford to skip this. On the other hand, if you care about playing the game, if you are here for the adventure, this is the most barren landscape we have ever seen. It forces a shift in how we actually treat the game. We aren't really playing for the experience right now. We are not logging in to explore a cool new world or lose ourselves in a story, we are logging in to manage a portfolio. We are moving resources around, calculating our returns, and hedging our bets against future difficulty. It feels less like a space fantasy RPG and more like an investment strategy. We're just managing assets until the market opens up again in version 4.0. Which brings us to the final question of the video. Given that trade-off, peak power on one side and virtually zero new gameplay loop on the other, how are you handling this? Are you buying into the revolution? Are you pulling constants and building that Exodia team we talked about? Or are you just checking out, entering maintenance mode, doing your dailies, and waiting for the game to actually start again? Let me know in the comments down below. But that is all from me, 𝗖𝗍𝗆𝗆, and I will see you in the next one. Cheers!